Okay, so well, welcome everybody. It's lovely to see so many of you back again. And I'm going to ask if you don't mind just to mute yourself, but feel free to come in at any point if you have any questions or anything you want to share. Just feel free to come in. We're a small enough group where that's fine. Um, there was homework from last week's, but before we ask about that, I know that we've got a couple of people joining us who weren't here last week, Azul and Mike. So last week I don't know whether you've had a chance to see the recording. Last week we just asked people to just say, introduce themselves and say where they're calling from, and it'd be lovely just to hear from you, in whatever order you want to do it, Azul and Mike. I don't know if there's anyone else who's also joined us. Claire, were you here last week? Oh, so Claire, that invitation extends to you too. And anyone else, I can't seem to get everybody on the screen at the same time today. And so, Mike, you're unmuted.
Okay, yeah, I'm Mike. I'm from Carlisle in Cumbria, UK. I've been interested in 3Ps, I don't know, for 2 or 3 years now. I've worked quite a bit with Christian regarding the 3Ps and Jackie as well. Jackie and I are good friends and helped me out. Because I tend to go off beam a lot. But I'm a shamanic practitioner. That's what I normally do in my day job when I'm okay. That's a little bit about me. I could talk all day, but I'm not going to. You'll be pleased to know.
You'll have plenty more opportunity to talk, Mike. Thank you very much, and good to see you here. I'm glad you were able to make it live this week. Who's next?
Hello, I'm Claire.
Hi, Claire.
Hi. I've sort of got into the 3Ps probably about 1.5 years ago via Nicola Bird. Big fan of Mavis, that's why I'm here. So thank you for having me. I'm based in Peterborough.
Well, it's lovely to have you, Claire. Thanks for that. Thank you. Azul. Yep.
Azul.
I think you have to. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. I'm Azul. I'm supporting Mavis with all the admin tetchy things. And I enjoy listening to her and learning from her. So I'm very, very happy. And I feel very thankful to have the opportunity to be here with all of you. I have heard you're wonderful, a wonderful group. So I'm here to be with you. Thanks for the time and the space.
Oh, thank you, Azul. Welcome. So maybe shall I turn it over to you to check on the homework?
Do you remember your homework? No. Well, last week we did a little exercise where I asked you to create a little irritation and then notice where you experience that in your body, and to follow that sensation wherever it wanted to go. And probably most of you, but at least some of you, had the experience of seeing that when you followed that tightness or that heaviness wherever you felt it, when you followed it, it may have moved around a little, but at the very least it dissipated. And we talked about how the physics behind that is that emotions and thinking are the same thing. They're physical. We experience them in our body. And all of our emotions are on our side because they exist to let us know the quality of the experience we're creating with our thinking. So that exercise wasn't something that we need to do all the time. It was a way to show you the connection between how you feel and the fact that you're creating that with your thinking. So, did anybody remember to do it? And if you did, what did you notice?
Can I come in?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I did remember to do it, and it was kind of around in my head for the whole week, but there was only one occasion that I was consciously aware that I was doing it, and it was at work, and I was feeling quite stressed about a call I was going to have to make. I felt quite anxious about it, and I thought, right, now's the time to take the time to think about this and where am I feeling this in my body. And so I took the time to do that, and I just kind of placed my hands here, and this is where I could kind of feel it in my chest. And I don't think I sat like that for any more than a minute, maybe just over a minute. And it did just dissolve, and it went away, and I was able to be calm, and then I was able to move on and take the call. So that was quite good. But then for lots of other times during the week, my head's been really busy, and I forget to take that moment to sit and maybe just to allow it to dissipate. But yeah, I just wish my thinking would change at times. You know, I would be able to clear the thoughts, and then I would feel clearer and be able to move on, if that makes sense.
Well,
I want to be able to.
That's what your emotions are for.
Yeah.
To lead you back to clarity.
Mm.
So when you follow the feeling instead of the train of thought, you become clear.
Right. So then continuing to think about your thinking and trying to sort what's going on inside your head is never going to work. No.
There's no chance of working. You wouldn't think it'd be so popular, would you?
No. That's where I'm going wrong then.
Welcome to the human race. So that really is what this is about, to see that all around you, in some cases now including you, you can see that people do not know how well they're made. They do not know that divine assistance that's built into them. Does that make sense? I'm wondering if I'm ever going to get over being just astounded at how well we're made. That what you did was you followed a feeling, your head cleared, and you did what a few minutes before you were afraid to do. That's no small thing. If that became your habit in a very short time, because it doesn't take long once you really, it's kind of like finding out after 5 years of driving that you have brakes. It's kind of clumsy at first, but it makes driving a lot easier and safer. So finding out that when you just follow a feeling, and it can be just a really, really heavy, painful feeling, it's not the enemy. It's just loud because it wants you to follow it. And then when you follow it, you come back home to clarity, to calm. It isn't always about being happy, but it is about being calm. Because sometimes we don't need happy, we need calm. That makes sense? Did anybody else notice anything?
I did. I did the exercise a few times, and what I noticed was as I followed the feeling, the thinking disconnected, and rather than blaming the feeling, I realised it was the thinking that was getting me caught up in the feeling, which is and something really well. It was strange for me in that I started to thank the feeling. And I started to sort of caught up. I mean, yeah, I got caught up, but I really noticed, and I thought, what a trick.
Oh, that's funny.
That trick for so long, it was like, wow.
Now I tell you, huh? Yeah, it can be, it's so simple, but that's why we missed it. Because we were so busy looking outside for the answer. And all that time, our emotions were letting us know we were shopping at the wrong store. But we didn't know that that's what they were telling us. We thought they were the enemy, which leads us into this conversation that we're going to have today. Did anybody else notice anything? I don't want to leave you out if you have an equally funny story, or even if it isn't funny. Azul.
Just something quickly. I was thinking while I was listening to you, because I have been experiencing with that, like some months ago, I was having like anxiety waves, at night, I just suddenly feel it. And I started doing that, just like, okay, paying attention to the feeling, seeing where it goes and detaching myself about the meaning. And actually, like, I don't know, a few days after I started doing, like, every day, same time, same thing happened, but it was lighter and lighter. And then suddenly, like, there was no anxiety, but I kind of saw things that I needed to do, like some changes, but they weren't changes in order to not feel anxiety. It was that I was following the emotions. I mean, for me, it's very clear when you explain it, maybe as that I have to follow it. It's like, okay, I want to get out from here. Like, who's the guide? The guide is a feeling. So I should follow the guide. And
Yeah.
you said once that it feels awful because it's supposed to feel awful in order that you move. And
Mhm.
I was thinking right now that it's like almost like when you vomit, like there's something wrong in your stomach, then you feel awful, then you vomit. It's awful, like that moment is not nice, but it's very physical. And after that, you're relieved.
Yeah.
And then the comparison for me was that before, if emotions were like a vomit, I was going to analyze it, like, why, what's the meaning of that, like taking the vomit and analyzing and watching. And really what we do when we vomit is just we clean up, we feel better, we move on.
Mhm.
So what is important for me is that in the past, I was giving too much importance to the emotions instead of following them, just like analyzing them.
Yeah.
And now it's so simple that it's hard to believe sometimes.
Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? At least, and I forget every once in a while. I don't think I've ever heard quite as gross an example as that one. But it fits. Well, even if you didn't do the homework, you can't now not know to a certain extent that your emotions are every last one of them are on your side, and they're all telling you the same thing. It's like they're saying, the way you're thinking feels like this. And that's true whether you're just ecstatically happy, whether you're peaceful and full of gratitude, whether you're irritated, whether you're angry, whether you're frustrated, whether you feel badly about yourself. All emotions are telling you the same thing. The way you're thinking feels like this. Follow me. One answer. Can't be that simple. That'll never work, right? What if it's the only thing that works? What if that's the answer? It's like Azul said, when she reached clarity, there was room for the next right step. Something occurred to her to do about the thing that she was bothering herself about. That's what I mean about the goal is clarity, not necessarily bliss. If it is about bliss, I haven't made it yet. Although every once in a while I'm blissful. And we will be happier way more of the time, but it will start from clarity, not from trying to think positively. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
Could I ask a question about that?
Mm-hmm.
You say about if your thinking's off, then your emotions are off, or if your emotions are off, your thinking's off.
No, I'm just saying your emotions are telling you.
Yeah, but
you're feeling, you're thinking.
Okay, but what about if it's something, like menopause that can create anxiety or depression or those sort of things? I'm kind of struggling with how you would know the difference.
It doesn't create that. It creates a sensation of discomfort and all of that. But the meaning we're making of menopause is what creates the emotions. Like, for instance, have you ever had like the flu?
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever had a time when you had the flu and you weren't unhappy about it? In fact, you were fine. Is that a yes or a no?
No. I feel like I should be saying yes, but it's no.
It's like, I know that it can feel like, say, menopause gets to decide how we think.
Mm.
No, it doesn't. It's a disturbance in our body. Our chemistry is changing. But the meaning we're making of that is creating our emotions.
So if I didn't think that it was the menopause, I wouldn't have it.
Well, it's probably, people have probably already proven that to themselves. They just didn't notice it. It's like menopause isn't something that comes one day and then goes the next day.
No.
It's a process of your body adjusting itself. So there are times when us female type folks are going through that we're enjoying ourselves, we're having a good time, and we're doing whatever we want to do, even though we're going through that. And then there are some times when we're having a terrible time about it. Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that, it's just da, da, da. But how do you explain the fact that we don't always feel miserable, even though we're still going through menopause?
Because your hormone levels are up and down. So when your hormone levels are at a different level, is that, I'm not saying that this is how it is, but if the way it's explained by the medical people, that your hormones are up and down. So when your hormones are up, that's when you feel all right. And when your hormones are down, that's when you feel rubbish. That's where I'm struggling.
But if you knew that your hormones were going ballistic, you could also know at the same time not to trust your thinking when you're in a low mood. Just to realize it's temporary. Now, it doesn't mean it becomes enjoyable. It just means you're not taking it so personally or so seriously. That isn't something, Jackie, that you're going to be able to find up here.
Yeah, I'm being too logical, aren't I?
Well, no, it's a really good question, and those questions should be asked because they're people really want to trust what the principles are saying. And I think one of the ways you can do that is throw questions at it. Well, yeah, but what about this? What about that? I did that. I don't want to just buy something because somebody says I should. I think the questions are really good. I'm just saying there's a lot of education we've gotten about things. And some of it is really helpful and actually true. Some of it is the best we knew, but it isn't true. And we have a lot of thoughts about menopause and about all kinds of other things that may be logical, but it may not be true. And this is one of them. And I'm just suggesting to you that you're not going to find the up here looking through all the logic that isn't true to find what is true. So I don't want to talk you into believing something that you don't yet believe, but it sounds like you have a sneaky suspicion there might be another answer to this than the one you had. And that is always, for me, that is always an indication that I want to get out of my head, open all the doors and windows, and see what occurs to me about it. And just kind of keep an eye on the experience I'm creating, like Donna talked about in her story. She just kind of was noticing what she was creating and then followed a feeling. And she had a different reality in a matter of minutes. She had a aha. It may not have been a, oh, I know how to save the world, aha, but it saved her from being terrified of a phone call. All those little ahas stack up to a much more stress-free, fear-free life. I have a kind of a funny anecdote about menopause. I worked in a runaway shelter for teenagers for 8-9 years. It was in a couple of great big old Victorian houses in Minneapolis that were kind of connected, and all is well except in the summertime because there was no air conditioning. It was so hot. Well, it turns out that summer is when I went through menopause, and I didn't know it. I just was hot. I just didn't know it. Now, that could be that I'm severely out to lunch, but everybody else was hot too. So I just didn't know it. But I had also, by that time, learned kind of how I'm made, not to the degree that I know it now, but enough so that it would just really helped. But I didn't know. I just was dealing with heat. I didn't think the heat was creating my thinking.
Yeah.
Well, how about we put that on the back burner and see what occurs?
Yeah, I'll sit with it. Thank you.
Okay, sure. So, Christian, do you want to tell them what we're going to do?
Yeah. Well, we thought that it might be useful to have a chat about addiction and how this work can have an impact on that, or how this work sees that. And it came out of a conversation that Mavis and I had yesterday. And I know many, and I know that addiction is not necessarily something that all of you have as an issue, but we thought that some of the things that show up in addiction really apply to the whole of life, and really, to my mind, addiction is the ultimate sort of outside in of looking for an answer, looking for happiness outside myself. And I know a lot of you, probably half of you on the call, kind of know my story, maybe more. But just very briefly, I was an alcoholic in my 20s, and well, before that, and got sober at that point, and I've been sober ever since. And I was involved in the 12-step program, and still have, I'm still involved in that. But I stumbled across the principles a bit over 10 years ago, and it really was the missing link for me, and via that process of insights and realizations and clarity and evolution, I've really had the happiest kind of decade of my life, and it's not, but that's the sort of side benefit of you, if you like, and of the understanding of the clarity that's come my way, and rather than the main thing, because that happiness still looks like days of up and down, and days when I forget that I'm feeling my thinking, and days when I want to blame other people around me and all of that stuff. But in our conversation yesterday, it took me quite a while to really talk about addiction in the principles community, because I was kind of conscious there was, with some people I came across, there was there seemed to be a sort of idea that addiction isn't even a thing, and that if you have a deep enough insight, you should see that, and whatever the substance or behavior that you had a problem with before, it shouldn't be a problem anymore. And I had a lovely insight in the conversation with Mavis yesterday, because I said, people have said to me in terms, well, you obviously haven't had a very deep insight, otherwise you'd be able to drink without difficulty. And what Mavis said was, as though that was the ultimate outcome. And it was the first time that just in you putting it that way, Mavis, that I'd kind of seen that, because that's what I wanted when I was drinking. I wanted to be able to drink without having the consequences. And really the ultimate outcome for me has been the freedom, the emotional freedom, the kind of spiritual connection, the connection with other people that I've found. and the and just drinking isn't an issue. It's not something I want to do any more than I want to revert to smoking, which is another thing that I used to do, or various other ways in which I was looking for a solution outside of myself. And you know, in the conversation that we had, we were talking about different ways that really the if you like, addiction is perhaps the extreme end, but many of us, and certainly many people, I think, who haven't come across this work, many people are really devoting their lives to finding things outside themselves to make themselves happy. So that's where we kind of kicked off, and maybe I'm not sure if that if that sort of reminds you of anything, if there's anything you'd like to sort of take forward there.
Well, I think what we were talking is so many people think addictions don't have anything to do with your thinking, that it's a disease, and that your body wants what you've been feeding it, whether that's liquor or drugs or sugar or, you know, cigarettes or whatever, that your body has urges. No, your mind has urges. Your thinking creates urges. But no, can you imagine that we are made so that our body actually wants heroin or a gallon of booze or a carton of cigarettes or a steady diet of sugar or whatever, or addictions that don't have anything to do with substances? That I live not too far from a huge shopping center. It's called the Mall of America. And if you like shopping, I suppose that's the place to go. But the Mall of America loves people that are addicted to shopping. And there are people really that get as much of a thrill out of buying something as somebody does out of booze or heroin or whatever. And it lasts about that kick lasts about as long as till they get home. And then they want to buy something else and something else and something else. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm really seeing the possibility that addictions are false needs created by our thinking. Can I say that again? That addictions are false needs created by our thinking. I remember doing some work at a treatment center for men here in Minnesota, and they really identified with their label of being addicts or alcoholics or what, that they introduced themselves as, I am so-and-so and I am an alcoholic or I am an addict or whatever. And the problem with that is that they actually believed that that's who they were, that it wasn't just a bad habit of thinking that they had, that they actually were that kind of a person, that they were their habit. And I wasn't there to talk them out of that. I was just there to teach them how their minds work. And one day, it occurred to one of them that he never ever had an urge to use when he was playing basketball. Ever. He loved basketball. He just loved it. And they had a court at the treatment center and he played as often as he could. And he realized that the reason he liked to play it all the time is that he was absolutely free of his addiction when he was playing basketball. So does that mean his body wasn't yelling at him to use? No. It means he wasn't thinking about using. He wasn't creating that need. Does that make sense? So do you guys actually know anybody, including yourselves, that doesn't have a false need? I don't. I think I need my kitchen to be cleaned so that when I wake up, it's clean. That's not true. I don't need that. I just prefer it. There's some things I prefer over other things. There's things I like over other things. But we need air, we need water, we need food, and a little shelter would be nice. But as far as needs go, that's it. The rest of it is want and preference and like and love and all of that. So I have a colleague and friend who was convening a regular group that she does, and for whatever reason they got into a question about amnesia and what effect that has on us, and they were speculating about that, and it sounds like it was a really interesting conversation, but until they were done with it, nobody had ever said they'd actually experienced it. But this one woman said, I've had an amnesia. And so they started listening to her story. And she had she had some kind of accident and just forgot everything. And people came into the hospital room, and she knew, she could feel that they loved her, but she had no idea who they were. It was her family. She had no clue who they were. The only reason she knew her name is that the hospital had put a ID bracelet on her wrist, and she could see what her name was, which didn't sound familiar to her at all. So all kinds of things like that. And slowly, over the months of her recovery, she started remembering some things, and some things started looking familiar. And she went to her family doctor, who she'd been seeing most of her life. And I can't remember why she asked him, but she said, was I a smoker? And oh, I know what it was. She'd smelled smoke on people's clothes, and she just thought it was the most disgusting smell. And somebody had said, well, you used to smoke. And she said, oh, not me. God, who would do that? So, but she got curious, and she asked her doctor, and he said, oh, 3 or 4 packs a day. You always had a cigarette, and you would light one off the other. Well, she could not imagine that, because she had no desire to smoke, no desire at all. What do you make of that? Anybody got any ideas about that? Yeah.
It occurs to me that maybe the thinking that she that had created the need to smoke was no longer there.
Sounds good to me. Mhm.
Where did it go? Where did the thinking go?
There's a great big hole in the atmosphere where useless thoughts go. I got a lot of them up there.
But if it's a thought, it's a construct. You know, if our how I see it is that at essence there's no thought, but we have the capacity to think and create desires and create cravings and all of that. Those are just uses of our creative capacity. But the thought itself doesn't have any form; it's flimsy. And when it's so, it doesn't have any separate existence outside of our capacity to create it.
Yeah.
And no matter how powerful the desire or the craving, it is just as flimsy. Everyone is just as flimsy as anything else, as you know. And I do want to say, because I wouldn't put it to the test with your amnesiac lady, Mavis, but it would be interesting to see what might happen were she to have taken a cigarette, whether that thought might have been re-triggered, or that desire might have been re-triggered. And I really don't know the answer to that, but I do have a certain respect for the loss of control that I experienced myself in my own life, and I know when it happened. But equally, the point of getting sober was instantaneous. It happened on an insight.
Mhm.
An insight is the most powerful experience of change. It wasn't like the insight wasn't just I should stop drinking. It was like the desire was lifted out of me.
Mhm.
Um,
It went up in that hole up in the atmosphere somewhere, right?
Well, it dissolved. I think it dissolved. It was no more. It was no more because it didn't have an independent existence. And
A thought
once,
doesn't have any power except
Mhm.
what we give it.
yeah,
So if we don't give it any power, it's gone.
yeah,
Well, I'm not actually, neither Christian and I are trying to convince anybody of anything. We're just, it's a subject that comes up a lot with people who think there might be an exception to the idea that all human experiences are thinking. And I can understand that because of I have family members that have been smoking since their teens. And they've even quit a couple of times for a few months, but then they go back to it. And it must be really hard. They just, they can't let go of them. Now, it could have been that I would have been a smoker, because back when they all learned to smoke, it wasn't seen as something that was dangerous. In fact, it was glamorous, right? And my brother's girlfriend tried to teach me how to smoke. I was a total failure at it. Absolutely. I coughed and I could not do it. And I was kind of embarrassed that I couldn't do it, but I lucked out. I don't have to worry about quitting it because I was a failure at it. But and she kept saying to me, yeah, it tastes really bad at first, but you get used to it and then you like it. And I remember even at the time, there was something that sounded a little funny about that, but I didn't go any farther with it. But still, if you don't even think about using when you're playing basketball, then it's got to be a thought. I remember this treatment center one day, I said to the guys, you know, when you're out walking and you walk down the street and you walk by a liquor store, I'm pretty sure a bottle doesn't leap off at the shelf and run out and throw you down on the ground and pour itself down your throat. And one guy said, well, it feels like that. So, but what he was saying is, it feels like that. It feels like that bottle has power. It feels like that cigarette has power. And if it feels like that, the feeling is coming from a belief. It isn't coming from the cigarette, from the bottle, from the needle, from the store, from the sugar bowl. It's not, that can't be, because if it was, everybody would be overpowered by a bottle, by a cigarette, by a bowl of sugar, by a store. It's gotta be the meaning given to it by the individual. And that, in my opinion, comes from believing that our emotions, particularly our painful ones, are the enemy. So if I think they're the enemy, I'd want to pour something on them too, or shoot something into them, do something to numb them, because they're making me miserable. If I didn't know it was my thinking that was making me miserable, I would want to numb those feelings too. But that would be like, say, a cook that doesn't want to get spattered with grease. So he shoots Novocaine into his hands. Well, the grease spatters won't hurt, but he's going to have a real hard time using his hands. Or it'd be like a airline pilot doesn't like what his instruments are telling him, so he covers it up with a tarp. It's not a good plan. The instruments are on his side.
Mavis,
I guess I am trying to make a case for it. Now that I think about it.
I have a question for you, Mavis. So in my own life, I have become free of the need to drink or smoke, or I was bulimic at one stage. But I'm wondering, all of those occurred via an insight, and completely not in the same sort of way, but they all, and there was a sudden shift from being caught up in my thinking, feeling like I was being transported to the pub on the day that I didn't want to drink, and found myself there. So it was a change from that to having the power and the freedom to not do that and have the desire lifted. But I'm interested, have you experienced in yourself or another person, for example, using the kind of exercise that you gave for homework? Have you seen that set someone free from what has felt to them like a powerful craving or desire?
Sure. I remember years ago, Sid Banks was in town, and I was going to go listen to him, and I took one of my kid clients with me, 16-year-old boy, who I had never seen him without a cigarette. He had to put it out when he was around me, but other than that, he was smoking all the time. Anyway, I took him to see Sid, and after the second break, I mean, we went out in the first break and he's smoked, and the second break we went out and he took out his cigarettes and he looked at it and he went over and he threw them in the trash bin. And I said, what did you do that for? And he said, I'm done. And he never said anything else about it. And I knew him for quite some time after it. That was it. It was, I don't know how to explain that with thoughts, but he said afterwards, I felt so good. I didn't want to do anything to disturb that. And he saw an insight that smoking would disturb that. My brother did the same thing. He'd smoked for years and years and years in his mid-40s. He just looked at a cigarette one day and said, I'm done. And he never even, as far as he tells me, he never even wanted one after that. It was a moment. Now, we are, part of our divine engineering is that we are made so that at any given moment, we can see something we never saw before. It doesn't have to be something that you save for later on because you only get 2 chances. We're made so that that can happen all the time. Hence, following a feeling to clarity. Because when you're calm and clear, you have just made room for insights. Doesn't mean immediately you're going to have one, but that's how they happen. It's not magic. It's that we are able to not only use stored thought, but to receive thought from the universal energy, intelligent energy that we've never seen before. It's kind of like if I asked you if you could imagine a color you've never seen. Could you? How are you going to do that? But how about, could you imagine there might be a color you've never seen? Yeah. So it'd be like imagining that you're stuck on something, but there could be an answer that you'll get as soon as you calm down. That you're going to see something you hadn't seen before. And that can happen at any moment, any moment. It can be your norm. Can you imagine a norm that's filled with instant after instant after instant of seeing something new? It can't be that impossible because that's the way little kids are most of the time. They're just full of, wow, look at that. They're full of wonder. That's, I think, what it means to be wonderful. Full of wonder. You are already made with that app. That at any moment, you could see something never occurred to you before. And it doesn't need to be this great big explosive write a book about it moment. it could just be this little cat feet moment. Oh, I never thought about that before. Oh my gosh. We haven't had any fun yet. Good.
How's this landing with it, with everybody here today, everyone in the group? Any questions, any experiences you want to share? Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to, just on that, what you were talking about, I was just thinking, well, so I teach drawing and painting and that kind of stuff. And you know, I talk about you know, people making marks on paper, and that every you know, put your pencil to a piece of paper, a blank page, and that mark is the first mark that's ever been on that page anywhere in the universe. And it's interesting, there's a kind of it's in Proverbs, I think, or maybe it's in Ecclesiastes, I think, in the Old Testament. There's a verse, or it's just, that talks about there's nothing new under the sun, that everything has always been and there's nothing new. But paradoxically, everything is always new. There's the two kind of ways of looking at it, and that's just something that just sort of came really strongly to me the other day, that there is that kind of balance. There's two things, like, but that the thing was that really that everything is always new. If I move my hand, or I blink, or I, you know, talking to you guys now, but look around the room, it's always new. It's the first time that was ever done by anybody, anywhere, you know.
Yep.
So it's that to me is amazing. And that is what,
I bet people love taking lessons from you.
Yeah, I don't know. I had my nieces and nephews here today. I haven't seen them much in recent months and weeks, and that was lovely. And I got a little message from my 9-year-old niece saying that she had a lovely afternoon. So that was nice. So yeah,
You are absolutely right about that. That right now, this moment has never happened before. Nor this one.
Yeah.
Nor this one.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. Yeah. And just because we're not babies anymore doesn't mean we can't see it that way.
Yeah.
That's a great story. Anybody else? Questions or stories? I love stories.
Okay to jump in? It's David.
Hi, David.
Hi. So just on the topic about addiction. So I don't think I've got any addictions, but maybe I do. But I became teetotal and vegetarian about 6 years ago. And my partner at the time was an alcoholic. And something you said earlier, Mavis, about, was it your brother? No, it was the boy who smoked. It said he just felt so good he didn't want to disturb it by having another cigarette. It reminded me so much of what happened to me. I had the insight that I loved life. Like I fell in love with living and everything that was involved in life, all the good stuff, the bad stuff, the hard stuff. And I realized I never want to do anything that takes me out of that. And so I said, I no longer drink alcohol. And about a month after that, I became vegetarian after being a meat eater my whole life. And I've not touched alcohol or meat or chicken since that day. But in the topic, just thinking back to the conversation about amnesia, I had amnesia about being vegetarian because about 6 months after stopping eating meat and chicken, I went to the cinema for the first time. And that was the first time that I had been since being vegetarian. And I was standing in the queue to get a hot dog because that was the thing that I did if I went to the cinema. I immediately went and got a hot dog and a juice. And I'm standing waiting to get my hot dog, and I got right to the front of the queue and went to order and then remembered, oh, I don't do that anymore. And I burst out laughing. And the person who was about to serve me was kind of really confused. And I found it hilarious. I was like, I forgot. How did I forget? And it was because that was the first time back in that setting that, I just was an automatic pilot. So I totally get the amnesia thing.
I bet that guy is still scratching his head.
Yeah. And for a minute, I was really upset because when I was standing in the queue, I was really looking forward to having the hot dog. And then realizing that I couldn't have it, I was like, oh, I can't have that. Or rather, it's not that I couldn't have it, it's that I didn't, I don't do that anymore, so I didn't have it. So yeah, let's share that.
That's called an insight. They're very entertaining.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Thank you.
Sweet. Anyone else?
It's also fine if you disagree with anything we've said, because that's good too.
Say again.
I was saying it's also good if people disagree. I mean, feel free to share that or a different perspective.
I guess I was actually thinking there, because I was thinking about the smoking, because I used to smoke and I stopped smoking when I went to Alan Carr. It was a one-day workshop, and he debulked all the kind of myths I had about why I smoked. And so I was then wondering why, like, when I'm going out and buying my multi-pack of picnic bars every day when I'm supposed to be in a diet, is it not easy for me just to say, well, I'm not going to do that? Because I do think this is my thinking, that I want that sweet treat, but I ignore it. And when I was just thinking that there, then it came to my mind that when I actually stopped smoking, I didn't initially do it for me. I took my sister to the Alan Carr workshop because she desperately wanted to stop smoking. I wasn't that bothered. So I paid for her because she never had any money. And the consequence of going for that was I ended up not smoking. So I was just playing about with that idea sometimes. I stopped smoking for an idea that was bigger than myself. It wasn't actually just about me. And I wonder then, is kind of going on a diet or not eating sweet things or whatever, it's like I don't have a belief that I'm conscious of that says you're not important, but I'm guessing somewhere there's something there that it doesn't really matter. Does that make sense? Or, I don't need to bother with that or giving that up or being healthy or not eating sweeties because I can do that another day, or I'm not sure. And then I wonder, do people understand what I'm saying? Am I talking too fast? Is my voice too Scottish?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. Nothing.
Good.
I'm just thinking that you have a habit that I've had off and on all my life, that I would do something for someone else that I wouldn't do for myself. Isn't that interesting? Like, what's up with that? I'm worthy. But I have had a habit off and on all my life that I'm not as worthy as other people are worthy. And I think that's probably pretty common. And I think we should all get over that. I think it would be really helpful for us to consider the possibility that we are a perfect part of a perfect whole and deserving of respect and kindness.
I think, thank you for saying that, but in the context of our thinking, it's not a conscious thought. So I'm making an assumption that something of that is there. So it's how to change. So is the thinking, it's how to change the thinking if you're not actually aware of, you know, where the thoughts are, what the thoughts are that are leading to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but we don't actually have to know what we're thinking in order to know that we're thinking and that it doesn't feel good.
Ah, right.
It occurred to me, Annette, when you were speaking, that sometimes people hear something fresh and new in this work when they're in a situation such as that, where they're not really doing it for themselves, and it might not be that they're doing a good turn. It might be people who are, say, working on the sound in an event or posting a recording. And I'm not suggesting this is a strategy, but I think there can be situations where you're exposed to what's being shared, and it seems as though the content is incidental, but what can occur is it's like the intellect's bypassed, the debating society's bypassed, and the truth just goes right into your heart.
Yeah.
And so it's not that you have to be doing good, as it were, being and that's not, and it again, that isn't, as I say, it's not a technique. We can hear it when we're showing up and engaging in the conversation and choosing to be here deliberately as well.
Yeah.
Or in any moment, doing anything.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense what you said there, Christian. And then maybe with Mavis as well, talking about each one of us is worthy and wonderful. And my mind does think, yep, we're going to hear this every time we come to these meetings. And I guess that is part of that resistance, almost in some way, to hearing that message, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, you just have to notice that.
Yeah.
Just notice that. And you don't have to do anything about it, because it's just some old thinking. And it doesn't matter where you got the thinking, how long you get, who gave it to you. It doesn't matter. You just notice the feeling and follow it.
Yeah. I guess when you say that, I think, like, when I'm going to buy that chocolate bar, I already know it's my thinking and I want it and the desire for it's there. And I think, well, I shouldn't go and buy it. And then I just think, but I'm going to buy it anyway, and I still go. So I guess my question is, how do we make that leap from, how do we choose to not act in our thinking?
So that last part, say that again.
Yeah. How is it we go about, how is there a way to choose to not act in our thinking? Because if I know that I'm thinking and I'm going to buy the chocolate, but I'm just ignoring that, knowing that it's not good for me, then I'm not choosing what's good for me, if you like. I'm choosing to ignore that.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Doesn't it?
I know it's a lot of work because I've been there. It really is just the same thing. You'll notice a certain amount of stress around a chocolate bar. Just not, I mean, you're not wearing yourself out. It's just this, well, should I? Good time to just be still.
Yeah. Yeah.
See what comes to you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll be chasing the chocolate for another while, but thank you.
You don't know that.
You'll see. Sometimes everything starts to change when you follow a feeling. Because you get so you notice sooner and sooner when you've tightened up, when you're creating stress that you don't even know you're creating, but you can feel it. And you just follow it, just and you get clear. And we're just a lot smarter than when we're clear. We're kinder, we're wiser. We make way better decisions. The best thing I get out of following a feeling is that I don't act on my worst thinking. And the only reason I like it, because I don't like cleaning up messes that I made. I don't like it. So I'm perfectly willing to calm down in order to not have to clean up a mess that I made, which includes saying mean things to myself or somebody else, or reacting badly or whatever. I'm just smarter when I'm calmer, and my emotions are on my side about that. They're letting me know when I'm calm, but they're letting me know when I'm not. Now that's friendly. None of us have a friend that's that helpful. How are we doing? What comes up for people?
Mavis, can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
I get what you're saying about, following a feeling. But you know what I really struggle with? If the feeling is really horrible, and then you have reoccurring thoughts and worries, creating, sort of one bad feeling after the other. What's a good way of coping with that? When it sort of feels like it's a lot of the time.
Well, the thing about Claire, you weren't on the exercise. You weren't here last week, right?
I watched it. No, I was at
Okay.
work. Unfortunately, I couldn't.
So you know what I'm talking about then. So when you put your attention on a feeling and you follow it, I'm not saying put your thinking on it. You just put your attention on that sensation, like it's a flashlight, and you follow it. That takes you to calm. The feeling dissipates. The only way it could start kicking up others is if you go back up into your head and start thinking things again. If you just follow the feeling, it dissipates. Because you took your attention off the thinking that produced it. If you put your attention back on your thinking, the feeling will come back. It's not going to leave you alone. It's not going to say, oh, forget it. I'm going to quit telling her. what she's doing with her thinking. She never listens to me. I'm not gonna. That isn't what happens. It's on your side 100% of the time. Azul and I were talking yesterday. Azul, do you remember the description you had of depression?
Yeah. How do I explain this? Sometimes I feel like depressed and something that just happens, you know, like suddenly, no reason. And the other day, I decided to not to do anything about it. Like I usually go to, like, I don't know, watch Netflix, eat ice cream, call a friend, whatever. And this time I was just, okay, this is happening. This is how I'm feeling. I just keep living my life. And then I was washing dishes, I remember. And I had a thought about what if depression is just only like a set of thoughts, you know, a set of thoughts that comes and visit me from time to time without adding any meaning to that, you know, just a set of thoughts. And for some reason, as soon as I saw that, the feeling depressed was off, like in one split second. It was like waking up from a nightmare or seeing a movie and forgetting that it's a movie, and then I remember it's a movie, and then I'm okay. It sounds silly and like very, very simple, but I don't know, it was that way.
It is like a movie. I mean, it's like any time in my past when I was depressed, it was always the same thoughts. I was depressed about this, and then that led to this, and that. It was like it piled up, but it was all familiar. It was always the same thing. It's like watching a movie that you never liked the first time, and you play it again, and then you play it again, and you play it, and you forget that you get to decide whether you're going to play it. You get to decide whether you're going to watch it. It doesn't decide itself. That's really helpful to know. I was one of my clients was a young teenage girl, and she'd been depressed a lot, and I asked her one day if when she turned on her television, if she ran into something that she didn't want to watch, what did she do? And she said, well, I just changed the channel. And I said, well, what if you can do that to your own mind? You can just change the channel. And for some reason or other, that clicked with her. I have no idea why that clicked and nothing else did. But I see her every once in a while now, or even since then. She's a middle-aged woman now, but every time she sees me, she goes, it's like, it's that simple, but it doesn't seem like it's that simple at first. It's clumsy. It's awkward. It's like, you know, the thing about when I was talking to Annette, the thing about not treating ourselves as well as we treat others. That's just a habit. That's not a disease. It's just a habit. It's we wouldn't, some of the things that we tell ourselves, we would never say to somebody else, would we? Like, what's the matter with you, you idiot? We don't say that to other people. But us, yep, we get it. Let's agree to get over that. Let's agree to see, I'm not going to do that anymore. That's not nice. I wouldn't treat somebody else like that. I'm not going to save it for me.
Mavis, I have a question on this subject of depression. I have been experiencing that lately for the last month or so, which is kind of out of character for me. And it feels slightly different. So for example, if I am in a bad mood about, if I'm having a lot of thinking, being irritated with someone, let's say, I can feel the source of that mood is my thinking about that person. In my experience of depression, I'm not having depressed thoughts about anything. It's like a feeling without a bunch of thinking, if that makes sense. I wonder what you have to say about that.
It still is thinking. It's just thinking you don't know you're doing. It's just so much of the thinking that we do is just, we just aren't aware of the content.
Okay.
Sometimes I know what I'm thinking, sometimes I don't, but I'm always feeling it nonetheless. And if you know that, it's really all you need to know. Because it doesn't matter what the thinking is. It doesn't matter. It's kind of none of our business. I know that's kind of an odd thing to say, but what we're thinking is none of our business. Just that we're feeling our thinking all the time, and our feelings are 100% on our side.
And so with that depression, then I could go to that feeling, that depressed feeling, and follow that.
Where do you feel it?
Well, that's the thing. I kind of feel it all over my body, but
then just pick a place.
Okay. My heart, I guess I would say.
Great. Just put your attention on it.
Yeah, and then I feel really sad, which is different than depression for me in my experience.
You keep following it, you're going to find a really nice place.
Okay.
There might be something you need to cry about.
It
washes your brain.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't make that up. My son, when he was about 3, told me that. So
Did he?
I believed him.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. It washes your brain. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I'll try that.
Mavis, I have a question. So I had a situation that I was, I think, trying, which involves obviously thinking with hindsight, to come to terms with, as opposed to be in resistance to. And I seemed to get there, and it felt like I had an insight. And then like a week later, I just felt like I was back in the same situation again. Is it simply what you've been talking about? I've just gone and picked up the old thinking again, and so I've found myself back to square one. It doesn't invalidate the insight, because I've just been feeling very discouraged. But is it just as simple as that?
That's right. I think that we'll have the insight, which is really important. And then the same old thoughts will come into our head, but now we know what they are. And so we can practice when they come in, seeing, I got your number.
Yeah. I think I was in a low mood when it happened, and I was just not like aware enough to see that that was going on. But that was before our session last week, and it's really interesting about following the feeling. I just love the way, I'm sure I've heard it before, but it's really landed about just clarity is the name of the game, and in following the feeling to clarity is what brings the insight, is what opens up the space for the letting go, or that's why it's cool to change the channel, isn't it? It's kind of like that's what we're doing by following the feeling.
That's right.
I really like
it
that.
It isn't that you change what you're thinking. It isn't.
Exactly.
It's like, oh no, think positive. It's not that.
Yeah, no, because that's impossible. Yeah. Is there anything else that you can add that around resistance generally that might be helpful? Resistance to a situation or whatever, to what is basically.
To tell you the truth, the longer I live and the more I see the truth of it all, the simpler it gets. All I do is notice when I tighten up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when you notice you're distracted. As soon as you notice you're distracted, you're not.
Yeah.
As soon as you notice you tighten up, you let go.
Yeah.
I am not immune to walking around carrying a grudge about something. But boy, does that tighten me up. So I can't tolerate it too long. I recently had a bout with that, and I just can't tolerate it too long. I just have to say that enough. That's it. Enough. And I think that's just what happens. You get intolerant of self-created suffering, and you just notice it sooner. And I just call it tightening up. I couldn't most of the time tell you any one specific place unless I stopped and examined where I'm feeling it. But it's a tightening up. And usually when I notice it, I just let go and I take a deep breath, because stress makes your breathing shallow. And breathing's good, huh? Yeah.
Mavis, you said something I think was really important a little while back about it. This can be clumsy at first, and I think that's so helpful to know that. And I was going to just illustrate it with, I had a conversation with someone this afternoon before the call, and he is caught up in a sort of obsessive relationship that's going nowhere as far as I can see, and he's very, very upset about it. But he found something. We were talking about this stuff, and he found some relief, and he came up with the metaphor. Oh, he said, "Oh, I'm like the projector man. I'm creating it." But then he immediately went to what's the mechanism? What's the mechanism? He'd seen something, but then he wanted it to be all tied up with a bow, and something he'd just click his fingers and switch off the feeling from. And I think there is something of just that there is something of grace in this, that that we evolve, and insight comes as a gift. It's not in the control, as I see it, of our of our conscious mind, of our logical mind. There is something of noticing what shows up, and and like developing a sense for that, moving in that direction.
Well said. Yeah.
and being comfortable with the the clumsiness or
Yep.
the awkwardness in the early.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm noticing time. I think we're coming. Oh, we've actually just gone over. Are you giving us homework this week, Mavis?
Nope, it doesn't do any good. These students will not do homework. I'm not You're going to be doing homework whether you realize it or not. So I don't have to tell you that. Just notice when you tighten up and notice when you're not. Just notice.
Lovely. Lovely. Well, listen, thank you, everybody. Mavis, thank you again for what for me has been another wonderful session. I'm going to just end the recording now.